don't see a ton of 6-5 wins from this team. Looking at getting one done in that way, what does it say to you about the group's ability to maybe win a different way?
Well, I mean, I love that we scored 6, and we really had the majority of the chances in the game. And it's not a slight on David. We gave up some really high quality chances that I thought they finished on, but generally they didn't have as much as they would typically have. So I'll look past the score on that one. And again, that's not to put it on David, because the looks with Hurdle 2 feet in front of the goaltender is a pretty tough stop. So we have to clean up a couple of those things, but yeah, I'll take the 6 and move on.
So when you see the 6 goals and the way that you guys created the chances, is that kind of one where you can ignore how many goals you gave up in that game when the team's been so good defensively this year?
Yeah, I think that's just it. And it wasn't like they got 5 and they were really outplaying us. Of course, they did in the second period. They had some pressure where we made some mistakes by not being inside tight enough as wingers and let them come off the wall for 2. So, yeah, but when I looked at it overall, I was really surprised. They hardly had anything in the first. They hardly had anything in the third outside of the power play and the 6-on-5. Yeah, so all in all, a really good game for us. And I don't look at it as a poor defensive game at all. Sometimes the puck just goes in, but offensively we were strong.
Talked about the 2 highlight reel goals after the game, Fogues and Morsey. The 2 of those guys, maybe up and down at times in the year, but those 2 with Phil together, have the 3 of them maybe elevated each other when you put them on the same line?
I think so. I think our lines are set up pretty good right now. If you look at it, I think that there's some consistency out of that line. I think with Q and Kevin and Laugh, there's been some good consistency there. And I think Kuzi's really helped finish off with Kopi and Juice. I think we're gonna. I don't know what you guys think. I've been really impressed with Kuzi over 2 games. I think he's going to fit in there really nicely. Definitely a big addition on the power play. You saw it this morning. Our power play was the best it looked all year this morning, and. So there's real good balance. And, Sammy and Gino, I thought were extremely physical in Vegas, a real presence. So I like the way we're pretty balanced right now. And I change the lines a lot, as you guys know, but this feels right to me. And if we can keep going like this, I'd like to keep it kind of like this for a while.
You mentioned that line with Trevor. The goals have kind of come back for him. We were just talking to him about the way he scores. Kind of a unique release. He doesn't pull into his body. He doesn't pull back much. It's just kind of a chip. How have you noticed him develop that side of his game, and especially that unique release he has?
You know what? That's a really interesting question, because I had Morsey all the way back to Toronto, and I would never have told you that one of Morsey's strengths was his shot. And I think it was 2 summers ago, maybe he didn't tell you this, not last summer, summer before, he changed his curve. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's changed everything in his shot. And he's got a quick release, but you're right, it's above his toes, and it's not drawing it back, and it's just breaking his wrists. And to go with the new curve he's got, it seems to jump off it pretty well. So I think the curve, more than anything, it hasn't changed the shot mechanics, but for some reason the puck is coming off way quicker and harder than it used to.
Trevor mentioned that, change the curve
Yeah,
2 years ago, but it seemed like one of those things where when you hear players say, like, okay, how much is that going to change? But when you hear a player say that, you're like, okay, sure, and then it actually happens. Are you surprised by that?
That's it. Because I said to him, up 2 years ago, what have you done? Like, what's different? He goes, I changed my curve this summer. And it was like, oh, geez. Lots of guys change their curves too often, to be honest with you. They use it as a crutch. In this case, it's the most dramatic thing I've ever seen as far as how hard the puck was coming off his stick.
No 8 on the ice. Any update there?
He'll play tonight, but he'll be having maintenance days, if that's what you want to call them, probably the rest of the season. Yeah, from here on out.
Going back to Sunday, you guys were up 3-0. Sammy Helenius has that fight with Nick Hague. I don't know if you saw the game last night in Toronto and Utah. It's the same situation. They're up 3-0. Benoit has a fight, kind of gives some momentum to the other team. Is that a situation where you talk to the young player and say, hey, maybe that's not really the area where you want to go, kind of drop him a there?
Yeah, I didn't know that happened in Utah. I watched the second half of that game because I saw Toronto was up. I didn't know how they came back, and that doesn't necessarily, you can't draw a straight line there, but I think in the case of our game versus Vegas, the building was a little quiet. That building is never quiet, and it came alive again. So I talked to Sammy today. You give him so much respect for a young player to take on any comers. So that's where you got to start. Was the timing not perfect? No, it wasn't. That's something he's going to have to be able to distinguish in the future. But it's not a situation where I would go to him, where I did go to him and say, hey, what are you doing? He's just learning, and again, you give him the courage and the credit for standing up for himself and the team. But clearly, for them, the difference for me partially too was right after the goal, right? So it was quiet. So it was, You know, if it was the next shift and things were heated and something happened, you know, that's different. But this one seemed a little bit calculated and one that he could have avoided.
You mentioned adding Kuzmenko to the power play. It also seems like Kevin's played more of that left flank role this season. How do they work so well together? They both seem to really excel in those 1-2 touch pass plays. Is that where you're kind of hoping to see a lot of improvement?
Yes, I do. And I talked to Kevin about it during the power play today because Kuzi's really good down there. You know, there's some players that can be on the power play, and then there's players that are kind of elite in certain positions. And he seems to me as a guy that's one of those guys that could be, or I haven't seen him enough on film, has a chance to be like really, really good down there, to really bring a spark back and be able to use that low play and make teams respect that low play, which opens up the middle and opens up the cross seam to juice. So, you know, one thing has a trickle down effect on all the other options. When you're not worried about that, the deep press up higher, give Kevin less time and space. When they worry about it, they play a little bit lower. Now Kevin has other options. He come up, now he's going to go down. So, yeah, I mean, as you can tell, I'm a little bit excited about it because we've all had to watch it this year and it hasn't gone very well.
Coach, aside from the points by Clark the other night, is 200 for a game. Were you pleased with what you've seen the last couple of games?
Yes, yeah, for sure. You know, it's still, as Smitty, you know, rolls guys out, it's not going to be those three pairs just, you know, one after the other. Things happen and change during the game, but yeah, really happy with Clarkie. Glad to see him get on the board. Of course, we know that always makes a player feel good. It doesn't matter if it's Clarkie or Eddie or anybody. Everybody likes to get on the board. And I thought it was a great goal, good read by him, and probably more important than the read, it was the finish. Just a great finish. So yeah, really happy.
Goals in 3 straight now for Q. How have you seen him elevate his game these last few weeks?
Well, I love that goal that he scored in Vegas, and it was the overtime goal and the shot against St. Louis were nicer goals, right? But how did he score against Vegas? Kicked it out, drove to the net, went off his shin pad, right, or his leg. So he will get 10 or 15 of the other ones, but we need him to get 10 or 15 of those types of goals where he's driving the middle, he stops the net, goes off him, it's a 3-footer, like hurdle, and he bangs those ones in. So to me, the important part of Q is to be able to score goals in a variety of different ways. And with his speed through the middle, he should be end up in front of the net and the goaltender every time and not skate past, stop and stay. And then the other part is hurdle is such a great example. And Q will grow into that frame, but those guys are hard to handle when they get 3 feet in front of the goaltender. He needs to get a few more from there.
I want to ask you about a play on Saturday where LaFerriere drives the net and it looks like he gets pushed in the goalie and he gets called for goalie interference. We've seen that called a lot in the last few seasons. What's your communication of forwards? Because it almost seems like they're encouraged not to drive the net in that play. Because what are they going to do? They're just going to get a penalty. So what's your communication with players on how to handle that?
We let him go because you're turning the corner. You don't know exactly how much time and space. If you are worried about that, then I think we're not going to see anybody try and drive the corner. You're going to skate to the corner and turn up. So if you've got a step, go. I didn't argue the call. You know, he could have got pushed a little. I don't know. Protect the goalies. I think that's fair. I think it's a penalty. But we want to have our players have the courage to turn the corners and have them, take the defenseman on.
So you're kind of telling players always make that net front drive. You get a penalty,
If
so
you
it's all right.
think you've got a step, for sure. I mean, obviously, if you're going to just go and crash on the goalie, that's not the play. But I don't think that was the case. I think he cut hard. It looked like a scoring opportunity. So you always like players who take the puck hard to the net.